Everyone, my name is Kolbeinsson or RT Kolbeinsson. I am the writer and director of the Bexhill Bookclub, and I'm joined here today with Romy Bellamy, one of the lovely actresses that's part of this Bexhill Bookclub. Welcome, Romy. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good, good. Brilliant. Well, today we're just going to talk a bit about, other than just the play, about books in general, because after all, this is a book club, and I can see by the books in the background, you seem to be an avid reader. If you have read
Yeah,
all these books.
I haven't read all of these books. Some of these books I've read, some of these books I've bought with the idea of that I will read them. Some of them
Hmm.
were given to me as sort of presents or recommended.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're here and ready and waiting, basically.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I think that's probably the majority of people when they have bookshelves. It's a mixture of things, particularly things that were gifted and are made to make you feel guilty for not reading them. And you will one day. That's at least in my case.
Yeah, well, I just had a little bit of a cull of some books that were here in this house when I moved in, and some other ones that were donated. And so I went through mm, the majority of them. I read the first page, and if it didn't grab me on the first page,
Mm,
it's
yeah,
going to the charity shop.
you are
So all that I
ruthless.
have here now are literally the ones that I really actually do want to read rather than just taking up space.
Brilliant. Well, that's good to know. Well, first off, I think just to talk about the play a bit, you play Erica in the play. What can you
Yep.
maybe tell us a bit about her, who she is, and if you relate to her in any way?
Erica is a character who's very highly strung. She's a professional working woman. She's has her family. She takes care of her elderly mother. She feels that she has to be responsible for many, many things that are happening in her life. And her escapism through all of this is to have a book club so that I think she loses herself in the stories, and then once a week she gets together with a group of women who maybe are her friends. I don't know if she really has friends per se, but I think probably these are the closest she can uh, call friends to discuss these books in a way of just getting out of her situation a little bit. Not that she necessarily complains, she wouldn't, or if she does, she would do so quite sarcastically.
Hmm.
But she's tough. I think she's quite a tough woman. She deals with a lot. Um, so yeah, that's why I think she loves books because it's an easy not an exit from her life, but a nice distraction.
Yeah. Do you relate to her sense of escapism or her strength in her life, kind of utilizing these, yeah, escapism means to enjoy it? Oh,
For sure. I mean, I find a lot of my escapism in movies and books. It's a strange feeling when you've lost yourself in a movie or a story or even on social media or something like that, and you've looked at all this content and then you suddenly turn it off and then it's like, oh, wow, back to real life, back to reality. What's for dinner? I have to do my laundry. It's time for bed. And you think, where did I go? Where was I for that last 20 minutes? Because I wasn't here. I was somewhere else.
yeah.
And, and it really goes to show how your mind, how your spirit or whatever can just be sort of taken out of yourself for that short amount of time, be transported somewhere else. So in terms of escapism, yes, I can appreciate that. And I looked after my grandmother for a few years in her elderly years, and it is a big responsibility. And when there's no one else to do it, you do it,
Yeah.
and it does take its toll emotionally. And I have a family that I care for and love, but I enjoy taking care of them. I'm not sure how much
Yeah.
Erica really does, or I'm sure she does in a way, but I think she just wishes it was a little more two-way street, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly. Easy to maintain, which reality isn't. But speaking of books then and escapism, if you could name one of the two that you've kind of thought of, which one is that?
Okay, well, one of them that I have thought of, I think, is this one, which is Bleak
Hmm.
House
Right.
by Charles Dickens. I'm a huge fan of Charles Dickens. And the reason why I picked this book is because Dickens, like Shakespeare, was a master of character writing.
Mm.
His stories are populated with characters that are completely different from each other. Um, they bring their own elements to the story. So even if they're a tiny little character, they make an impact in some way to this story. They each have their own voice, which is to say, it's not the author's voice,
Hmm.
because I think sometimes a writer will often write at how they think, with their tone, with their colors, with their philosophy, and then a lot of characters start to sound the same because it's written with one voice. And Charles Dickens doesn't do that. They all have their own individual voices, whether they're male, female, young, old, poor, rich, doesn't really matter. And
Mm.
so he really does sort of weaves this imaginary world that these characters live in, yet again through all sort of social hierarchies and the times that they were as well. Um, so yeah, so Charles Dickens for one,
For
Bleak
one.
House.
That's great. That's great. In terms then of getting into these sorts of characters, and the process of maybe creating Erica as a character for yourself, how has that been over the course of the production?
It started off, I was kind of lost at the beginning of who she was, of trying to really get a hold of this person, being that um, sometimes the things she said, but how she feels were not, they were not in conflict with each other, but I couldn't quite marry the two.
Mm.
And so it really kind of came when I found things that I could relate to her about, say, for example, taking care of family members and juggling lots of things, and trying to maintain this level of control. But what I am not a person who lives by control. I'm very free um, person who doesn't, like just enjoys going with the flow and everything like that. So that was hard for me. How can I find this person who bottles up a lot, who, needs to be in control of things? And I was talking to my mother, and she was describing a friend of hers who I know, and it was like, yes, that's the person. That is a person who has this perfect veneer, and but underneath of that there is so much turmoil that is just bubbling over, but always comes out with a smile. um, and so that then allowed me to sort of latch on to this, the inner and outer workings of Erica. And then that from there it just sort of evolved. It just evolved with the story, what she said, my own sort of take on it. So sometimes rather than being super sweet all the time, sometimes she was a little bit more pointed, she's a little bit more calculating than completely sweet.
Mm.
But and sometimes I back and forth between the two. Like I think to myself, she's a bit of a bitch sometimes. And when she has this moment where everything sort of falls down for her, maybe I should have made her a bit more sweet so that actually people, the audience, feel sorry for her.
Yeah.
Are they going to feel sorry for someone who's a complete bitch? Then how I play. So you still try to find elements that are going to work for this person.
Brilliant. I think it's interesting that you bring someone into it that you are aware of, and that you do have genuine sympathies for in their current state. Which maybe if we are talking about Charles Dickens earlier with all his characters, maybe there was some of them that were definitely inspired by people that he would have known. But in
Sure.
terms of then of the second book that you've have brought in, which one's that?
Oh, well, I was torn between two. Actually, one that I just finished reading, um, but I'm not going to say which one that is because I'm only allowed two. So the second one that I just picked up was 40 Stories by Anton Chekhov, or Anton
Oh.
Chekhov. Obviously, both of these writers are no longer with us, so I
Mm.
should have probably picked a more modern writer. But the reason why I picked Chekhov for his short stories is because the art of the short story is literally coming in a moment of action.
Mm.
And it is for this time that they have you, which is just a snapshot into the life of this character and encapsulating a story there. And I think that really works when you want to hook a reader in. You want them, you know, you want them to stay with you. You don't necessarily want to bog them down with necessarily too much over detail or descriptions or too much lead up. It's like rather than bang, here you go. This is
Yeah,
it. This is the world. This is everybody that's in this world. This is what's happening. And just as quickly, you go. And that's
yeah.
it. Done job.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's writing short stories is obviously different from anything else. And as a writer, it is quite the challenge to think that you have a certain amount of space really to kind of tell that story. But I think I agree with you absolutely of starting with a bang. And considering that, you know, you read the first page of a story and whether it's good or not, that's the one that hooks you in. I can see why you would gravitate towards stories that are impactful, at least from the
Yeah.
get-go. So that's
Yeah.
great. In terms then, just finally, about the Bexhill Book Club, what do you think audiences will expect coming into this play? What is there to be found for them?
I don't know if they'd necessarily have any expectations whatsoever, except for the fact that they know that it's going to be about a book club.
Mm,
I don't think that necessarily there's anything like this that they might have seen before. So once they come in and they say, "Oh, right, okay, so here we have four women who are here to have a meeting," and then quite quickly things start to take a little bit of a sour note, or you get to know about these characters more, and that there's a slightly darker side to this group, or there's a slightly, this isn't um all bright and sunny.
mhm.
Then I think that they will be just sort of taken along for the ride, really.
Brilliant. Well, that's good. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Rami. It's a pleasure
You're
to obviously
welcome.
see you again. And yes, the audiences can see you at the Bexhill Book Club. Its final couple of shows in Palma for the 11th, the 12th, and the 15th of September. Thank you very
Indeed.
much for coming.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.